Hello, my name's Sonia Shikun. I am a New York qualified lawyer here in Manhattan, and I write a newsletter called The Commercially Savvy Lawyer on Substack and LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn and you'd like to connect, go ahead and send me an invite. I'd be happy to connect with you. Okay, today is Saturday, September 10th, and I'm sitting in Manhattan, and I have been following this news story, continuing news story from the Gulf states about Netflix and how Netflix is in trouble with some of the Gulf states for streaming content into the territory that is illegal in the GCC. The GCC states include Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates. For those of you who don't know, they are called the Gulf Cooperation Companies. They've signed a treaty, and they operate as a bloc in many things. So when I talk about the GCC, that's what I'm talking about. So last week, the news reported that Netflix was in trouble with the Emirates, Saudi, and probably Bahrain and Qatar, because they all have the same laws around Islamic values. And if you live there, work there, partner with companies based there, or indeed create content that you want to broadcast into the territory, you really have to be savvy about the cultural parameters in which you're working. So, the content that you make for an American audience or a British audience or European audience or Australian audience will be very different to the kind of content that you will make for the Arab audience, because the Arabs, the GCC states, have inscribed in their laws rules around enforceable rules around breaching Islamic values, and that includes homosexuality. So don't kill the messenger. I'm not talking about my views. I'm talking about another culture's views on homosexuality. So then this morning I woke up and I read a piece that a very famous Emirati lawyer called Dr. Habib Al Mulla, who was the UAE's partner with Baker and McKenzie, a big global American firm, have severed their partnership with Habib Al Mulla. Baker and McKenzie has severed their partnership with Habib Al Mulla because he tweeted about homosexuality. Now, in last week, he made some comments about homosexuality being offensive to the creator, etc. So you can go on Twitter and read what he wrote. You can press, if you don't read Arabic, you can press the translate button and figure out for yourself what he said. And he's announced that he and Baker and McKenzie have separated, parted ways, and this is why. Baker and McKenzie is American, so of course guided by probably more progressive, perhaps even woke, quote unquote, ideals of inclusivity, whereas in the GCC, homosexuality is still a crime and is punishable, although of course, these things, these lifestyles do exist, but they don't exist in the open. So I lived in Bahrain and Qatar for 15 years. I lived in Egypt for 1 year. So of course, all things exist in nature everywhere, but they're not out in the open in the GCC and in the Middle East at large, and are punishable by quite severe penalties. So that is happening, and it highlights a very important point about doing business on a cross-border basis. So here we're going to talk about doing business in the Middle East, but I think the points that I'll raise really apply to doing business internationally, because what happens when you decide to partner with the business, whether it's a law firm or a shipping company or an airline or an industrial zone or a free zone, anywhere around the world, not just in the GCC, you really have to be sensitive to the cultural mores and values and laws around those points existing there. So we're not cultural imperialists, or at least we should not operate like that. So, and in the law school that I went to, I studied law. It's the School of Oriental and African Studies. We learned about customary law, and like it or lump it, you have to accept the fact that different countries have different laws. For example, I remember writing an essay in my first year of law school on customary law, and one of our professors, he was an English guy, had spent a lot of time in Africa researching laws in Africa, criminal laws, and believe it or not, one of the viable defenses to murder in Malawi, for example, and some other East African countries, Southeast African countries, it is that you suspected that the person you murdered, male or female, put a curse on you, and so you murdered them to eliminate the curse. That is a viable defense in Malawi. I don't know if it still is, but when I was in law school from 1996 to 2000, that was a viable defense. I have to find the essay. I can try to repost it here, but that's an aside. Point being that we have our laws. We respect our laws, hopefully. Although that, anyway, in theory, we respect our laws. And when you do business with another country that has very different laws, a very different culture, you have to, I think, know ahead of time where you stand on certain hot button items like homosexuality or human rights and whatever the hot button item might be at the time, and think beforehand, do my values align with the values of this other company? It's no secret that homosexuality is against the law in the Middle East, although, rumor has it that a lot of stuff happens. I don't know. I've never witnessed the things that the rumors are about, but my point is, if you're going to do business in the Middle East or any other country that's very different to yours, you really have to make accommodations for and honor and respect the other partner's culture and legal framework. You can't be charging into the UAE and imposing, or Qatar or Bahrain or any of these MENA countries that are deeply traditional societies governed by traditional and orthodox religions. And some of them are multicultural and multi-religious, but still deeply traditional. And not all of them are very, very traditional or orthodox, like Saudi is extremely traditional, but Lebanon, Egypt, Bahrain are less orthodox. So anyway, the bottom line is that you can't impose your principles and laws and cultural parameters on another. So if you go into the Middle East looking for a partner, it's something to be aware of, and you have to be alive to it when thinking about doing business on a cross-cultural basis. And if you go to my LinkedIn, you'll see that I presented some Islamic or Arab values clauses that you will likely see in contracts when dealing with the Middle East. So it's a real thing. They don't pay lip service to their intolerance for alternative lifestyles. So if you are a company or a law firm or an individual that wants to do business in the Middle East, you have to figure out what your stance is and whether or not you're going to be able to tolerate their stance. Otherwise, it won't go well. You'll find yourself feeling uncomfortable, feeling shocked if you really uphold certain values, liberal values, angry, whatever. You won't feel comfortable and it won't work. So before you go into the Middle East, do your due diligence, figure out what the real mores are, and then act accordingly. You might decide it's not for you and not do business. Do you balance your profit margin against your ethical values? That's a decision for you to make. Okay, I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions about doing business in the Middle East, how you could mitigate against some of these cultural and legal issues, you can contact me and help you formulate a strategy. And of course, that counts as attorney advertising, which means I have to tell you that previous results do not guarantee similar outcomes. Have a nice day.